Okay, guys, so this will be the first in the series for foundational or fundamental foundation for freedom series. So we have a lot to go over in this series, guys. I mean, this is just part of the list of what we're going to go in depth on every point here and then on all these other things. And the first thing we got to get to is recognize and accept. But in order to even get there to recognition and acceptance, we have to understand that we were born into these programs, okay? You have to understand, you have to fathom that you have been living in a box, in a small little cube, and that little cube is what the parameters that are set, that they gave you, the system has given you to operate within. When all of this out here, eternity, infinity, as far as I can see and further, more than you can imagine, is available to us. They've got us through cultures, through these toxic, abusive cultures, societies, systems, hierarchies of governance and control, family units, peer pressure, everything, government, you name it. What they've done is the system has put us in a small, tiny little box that we can operate in. That's right here, okay? And in that box, you are a mind slave. You are a free man, but because of the abusive traumatic programming at birth and all the way through your development, you have become a mind slave. So you are consenting to giving up your authority and being a mind slave, because those are the programs that were written into you, and you don't know how to anything outside of those parameters. You have no clue. It's the unknown. So they have you contained, right? They have you programmed, and out here it says do not trespass. You're not allowed to think outside the box. You're not allowed to do any of that. There's no access. Not allowed. If you go outside of here, you're considered an outlaw, an outlier, right? A rebel. And why this is so important, so this is how we're starting this series off. We're going to talk about the most important thing that has to happen before any of the next steps in your journey to freedom, in your journey to wholeness, in your journey to reclaiming your essence and who you really are. The most important thing is for you to understand what abuse is. Abuse, the most common definition of abuse is misuse. Okay? It's that simple. Now in this program, over here, in this box, we've been programmed to think that abuse is something that only men do to women, or terrorists do to the United States, right? And of course, there's other things, abuse of a child, these things, But those are the two main things. Everything else in society is completely abusive and toxic. All the systems of governance, everything, and we're about to prove that here. But because we're stuck in here, in that box, the only thing that box allows is for us to associate abuse with, again, terrorist actions or the physical maltreatment of a woman by a man. Okay, those are the two most common things. And then everything else we slowly will go, oh, okay, maybe that is abuse. But we're hesitant on doing that, guys, and the reason is because we've been abused our whole lives. And not only have we been abused, but we've passed that abuse on. We've propagated and perpetuated that abuse through our compliance in these slavery systems, okay? Abuse also means violation, okay? To violate. It means perversion of meaning, to miscue things, to gaslight, right? Something happens and someone says, well, are you sure it happened like that? I think that's sort of your fault, right? And they're always turning on you. Or the perversion of meaning, the perversion of words, like the perversion of the word abuse. They abuse us by misinterpreting and putting out there that abuse is simply those few things that fall within their parameters. Rude speech, okay? Speaking rudely to somebody. A corrupt practice or custom, right? Like, let's take animal slaughter, the forced impregnation of billions of animals a year, and then forcing them to live in small confined areas. Most of them are just stuck like this. And just because you might buy farm pasture-raised cows doesn't make it any better. They're pumped full of hormones, growth hormones, and antibiotics, okay? And then they are slaughtered. A cow usually lives to 25 years old. That's an average lifespan for a cow. In the United States, they are slaughtered by 2 years old because it costs too much. If they didn't slaughter them at 2 and they let them live till 25, it costs you $500 for a pound of hamburger. So a corrupt practice or custom, we'll call that animal slaughter for nutrition, the lie of nutrition, not needed, right? Improper treatment is abuse. To treat improperly, to not treat correctly, right? To defile, to deceive, to impose on, to treat rudely, to revile, okay? Now, all of that falls under the definition of abuse. Every single one of those. There's more too, but we'll just keep it as simple as possible with the broadest definitions for us to get a handle on what's going on here. So we're going to look at abusers. We're going to run all the people in our lives through this system and see who the abusers are. First, we're going to come to parents. Okay? Think about that. Our parents were only required to give us a safe space when we were born. That was the only requirement, was a safe space. To give us respect, safety, comfort, ease, liberty, sanity, right? These were the things our parents were supposed to give us when we were born. Instead, what did they do? What did they do? They named, numbered, and cataloged us in slavery systems at birth. Oh, but Richard, everybody's got to have a social security number and a name. You're justified. What do we do to keep these people out of the abuse box, out of the abuser box, and not label them as abusers? We justify. So they name, number, and catalog us in slavery systems at birth. That's abuse. That's misuse. Humans aren't supposed to be named, numbered, and cataloged. Period. That's a violation of our human rights. It's a perversion of the meaning of what it is to be human. It's a corrupt practice or custom. All abuse, all fall under abuse. It's the improper treatment of somebody because you're going to be taxed now, right? And then they also allow the state to inject extremely heavy toxic metals and poisons into the baby. I think by the age of 2, it's like up to 72, the vaccine schedule's like 72 fucking heavy drugs and chemicals and metals that they're putting into you. And then, of course they justify, but they justify it too. They say, well, it's needed. Well, why is it needed? Well, if we didn't have all these things injected into us, we would die. We would end up with 30 different diseases and we'd just die. It's all a lie, guys. Think of how ludicrous. You got to free your mind. Get out of your mind slave box. Use your common sense, your critical thinking. Think for yourself. Get out of your programming. Quit justifying and excusing. Okay? So those are just the first few actions that our parents do. We haven't even gotten into our parents yet. Defile. That's defilement. To deceive. They deceive us. They tell us it's necessary. We have to do this. You don't have to do that. You should. Why did you give birth to a slave then? Why would you give birth? Because I love you. What kind of love is that? How'd you get that definition of love, Mom and Dad? Where'd that definition come to love somebody that you're going to bring them into a world where they're going to be enslaved from day one? Doesn't make much sense, does it? To impose on. to treat rudely and to revile. Okay? What else do our parents do? At 5 years old, between the ages of 5 and 18 years old, they place us into state compulsory indoctrination centers that they call education centers, where we will be tested for compliance every week, every day, every year for 12, 13 years. And why do they do that? Do that to get us to follow along. Is that the meaning of human, to do that? To put somebody into a compulsory compliance center to learn how to take tests? To learn how to follow orders? And I've gone over in several of my other videos of how the modern education system was founded on slavery, to make obedient, compliant workers for the factories. It's extremely simple. It's all there, guys, in black and white. And this is the history. This is the history that the winners tell you and admit to and act like, oh yeah, this is where it came from. It's okay. Don't worry. Think outside the box. Get outside the box, guys. Don't be a mind slave. So in order to say your parents would just that alone qualifies under almost every single definition of abuse. And in order to excuse that, you have to justify, you have to excuse them, you have to forgive them, you have to forget. Because if you don't forget, if you don't forgive and forget them, then that this is all abuse, then it's going to give you cognitive dissonance, and then your brain's going to explode. Or you double down, which is what people do, double down and excuse the behavior. Refuse to acknowledge. Most people refuse to even acknowledge this. They can't even sit there with this because it completely short circuits their mind. They can't deal with it. And a lot of people, most of the people I think that can't deal with these facts are parents now of young children, or parents who have had kids that are older now. Because in order to read this, they know they did all those things to their kids, so therefore that makes them abusers. These are plain and simple. We're not trying to point fingers. And I have kids. I have 3 kids myself that I brought into slavery and did all these things to that I just mentioned. Every single one of them. And we're not going to go into the more that parents abuse their kids, because I think that's enough. We're just going to give a broad overlay to get you guys, because in order to get to this freedom of this healing and becoming whole, guys, you have to start understanding what these things are. You have to quit justifying and excusing everything, because the justification and excusing, that's what a mind slave does. Because when it doesn't fit inside their box here, my parents love me, my parents love me, that's what's inside the box. Outside the box is your parents are straight up abusers that bred you as a slave into this slavery system for their own selfish reasons, and because they wanted something to love, or hopefully they could save the world with you, or at least save their own world. Okay, teachers in school. Again, teachers, no matter how nice they seem, no matter how forgiving they seem, no matter how patient they seem, teachers are abusers, period, guys. They're forcing an indoctrination, whatever their curriculum is, comes from, the head of the government that says this, okay, if they're a history teacher, this is the bullshit history we're going to teach you. If they're a science teacher, this is the fucking radicalized fucking religious ass science we're going to teach you. If they're, whatever subject, that's what they're going to teach you. And you are going to be required to have to pass the test. And that is misuse. A human is not supposed to sit there for 8, 9, 10 hours a day in a classroom and sit still and just agree and then have to remember the bullshit that's being propagated and programmed into it, and then have to write it down. That is not human, guys. That has nothing to do with what it means to be human. Teachers in school, yeah, and so, if you can't sit still, if you have a problem sitting still, guess what they're going to do? They're going to tell your parents that you need to be put on a highly toxic medication, like a very highly toxic medication, an addictive substance, a drug called Ritalin, or some other form of drug. They're going to, if you can't sit still in a classroom for 10 hours a day, 8 hours a day, if you can't do your homework when you get home for another 2 hours, 3 hours, some schools are extremely rigorous and have 2 to 3 hours worth of homework when they get home every day. Some schools have no homework. So teachers in school, I think that's sort of self-explanatory. We've gone into that, we're sort of crossed into that with the parents. Government. Your government. They tax you. There you go. Do you need any more than that? They take 30% of my paycheck right off the dick. Right at the beginning, guys. I don't even get to see that money. That's like working, if I work Monday through Friday, that's Monday and half of Tuesday that just, they take. Before I even get paid. They get paid. Every week. My whole life. 30%. And if you make more than I do, you can fall into higher income brackets and you're getting taxed at 40, 50% of your income. That's mind-blowing. That's slavery. Supposedly, if you believe history, we had the Boston Tea Party that flipped out over one small tax on one item. We're taxed on everything we buy. We're taxed on everything we do. We're taxed on everything. If you own your home, if you actually spend 30 years, pay your home off for the outrageous price that you have to pay for a fucking home, if you don't pay your taxes every year, the government will come and take it. It's always about compliance. This is abuse, guys. Again, abuse, a corrupt practice or custom. Your property is not yours, it's ours. You will pay us taxes. Oh, well, Richard, we have to pay taxes because we got to have roads and you're justifying. You're justifying. Before all these taxes came in, we had roads. We had everything before all these taxes came in. Well, Richard, we got to pay taxes. We got to have a military to go out there and kill all those brown people all over the world that believe differently than us. You're justifying. Think of that. Really think of what you're thinking here. You're thinking inside that box, those parameters that were given to you. Government, besides taxes, how else do they abuse you? How about you get on the road and when you walk out of your house, this is what lawyers say in America. They say because there's something like 70,000 laws on the books or something like that. It's utterly ridiculous. They say you can't walk out of your house without breaking 12 fucking laws, no matter what. And then they set these cops up, right? These police up to pull you over. They're allowed. They have the authority. They have a gun. They have high-tech equipment. They have all this stuff. And they pull you over for going over the speed limit, right? For not using your turn signal. For having a back light out. For not having a license plate on the front of your car. For not paying your insurance. For not paying for tags. For not paying for registration. For not paying for safety checks. For not wearing a seatbelt, okay? These are all abusive, guys. This is all a violation of your freedom to move around. Well, if driving is a right, it's a privilege. It's not a right, it's a privilege. Now you're justifying again. You're giving up of your freedoms and of your right to autonomy and your right to do what you want without being bothered by an outside force, a gang, thugs, that are going to shake you down and charge you money at any given thing because there's literally nothing you can do outside of the house that they can't fine or ticket you for or hassle you for or anything else. And if you want, you can justify and excuse that all day long, or you can refuse to acknowledge. But it doesn't change the fact that it's all abuse. Every single bit of it. And we can keep on going on government, but I think you guys get the gist. Work, bosses, managers. So how about work? Most people in the United States, what is it, 70% of people in the United States are working not even for a living wage nowadays. You can't make $20 in the United States and have a family. You can't make $20 an hour and have a family. Now, if you're on tons of government assistance and you're on Section 8 housing and they're paying for your food for your family and they're subsidizing this for you and that for you, yeah, you can probably make $20 an hour and have a couple kids and a wife. But otherwise, you can't work a regular job, without having to get into a deeper education and get back in their indoctrination system to get a deeper education. 50% of college kids are coming out of college, and this has been going on for the past several years, that 50% of college kids get out of college after 4 years of college and either can't find a job in their sector, or and they're taking minimum wage jobs. They're working at Sheetz, they're working at the gas station, they're working at the grocery store. Or if they do find a job in their field, they're only making 30 grand a year. Who's the fuck surviving on 30 grand a year after they got $100,000, $80,000 in student loans? It's ridiculous, guys. It's all slavery. It's all abuse. 100% abuse. So work, that's how work is abusive. They're not paying you. They're not compensating you for what you're doing. You're giving your life up. You get up, work 8 hours a day. You have to drive there. You have to get there. You have to perform. You have to be on your P's and Q's. You're required to do all these things for what? For just barely enough money to keep on hitting your addictions, to keep a roof over your head, to keep the lights on, to keep putting poisonous, toxic processed foods and animal flesh in your fridge. So that way you can keep on poisoning yourself. It's all part of the mind slavery, guys. It's all abuse. Bosses and managers, and of course your boss is a manager. Oh, my boss is so nice. No, he's not. If he was not enforcing the compliance of the company that you work for, he would not be your boss, period. It's that simple. And if you work for a small company and it's just one person, you are still required to do all these things. There's no company, there's no boss, there's no manager in the world that is going to allow you that is going to put your individual needs over the company, period. It's all abusive, guys. It's abuse to the individual. Well, Richard, what's the answer? Get out of your justification and excuses. Get out of your refusing to acknowledge these things. Just follow along. We got to at least admit that these things are abusive before we can go any further. Okay? Well, they have to happen. Let's not even go there yet. No, they don't. They have to happen because, again, you're in your mind slavery. You can't think outside the box. All you can think is, well, I need these things. I need a car. I need to have a house. I need to have a fridge stocked full of processed foods and animal flesh. I got to have my entertainment. I got to have my $1,000 phone. I got to have my fucking 400 channels of TV. I got to have my all of this shit. That's, if you are justifying what I just said, then you are fucking mind slave. You're a mind slave, guys. You're right over here. You're a mind slave. It's that simple. Your siblings, your family, right? Your family. Again, families fall into social hierarchies. Siblings, do nothing but fight and argue, get that tension, that aggression out. Usually siblings are more honest with each other and abusive towards each other than they are anybody else. So the siblings in the family are doing nothing but passing down what has happened to them through abuse, through trauma, through growing up and being placed into slavery systems, through, being forced into survival. That's all they know. So, tight-knit families, what's wrong with these things is these structures they're exactly what they are, structures, constructs, and they keep us in that box. They keep us from breaking out and doing differently. Instead of changing things, instead of changing and stopping the abuse, we continue to propagate and perpetuate it and reinforce it, that it's okay, it's just the way it is. So through the justification and excuses and the forgiving and forgetting or even worse, refusing to even acknowledge whatsoever that it's abuse, what we do is we say, well, survival of the fittest. Got to do what you got to do. Okay? Friends, the same way, they're only there when it suffices you, when it suits them, right? Friends, again, just because they're slaving away. Most people, older people, their friends are from work, because you can't even socialize anymore. You don't really get much of a social life anymore, because you spend all your time at work, and when you're not at work, you just want to relax, right? So we get our friends from work. So what's that doing? Perpetuating everything. Where are our friends coming from? They're coming from family structures and constructs that are, extremely toxic and abusive. So what are they? They're doing exactly what they know, guys. They're perpetuating everything. So again, when we get together with these people, all we're doing is reinforcing. If we aren't actively thinking outside the box, and we're just fine, and we're just, every time we get together with friends, we're finding dopamine hits, whether that's, we meet up to eat poisonous foods, we meet up to hang out at bars and drink poison, we meet up to at a coffee shop to drink that poison, we meet up, to I don't care if you're just meeting to go for a walk in the woods. It's still, these things are non-conducive to how we were supposed to be treated. Because when you go for that walk in the woods, are you talking and figuring these things out? Are you guys getting out of this box together? Or are you justifying and talking about all your addictions and taking your mind off and refusing to even acknowledge how things really are, and just living in la la land, and you're just getting that dopamine hit with that friend? It's like an escape from the slavery for a couple hours. That way you can just unwind, and so that way you'll have energy to get back to the slavery tomorrow and the abuse, right? Think about these things. All right, if your friends are not actively helping you think outside this box and realize things outside this box, and you guys are just playing your lives and your games and your coping mechanisms inside this box, what good is that doing you? You're just perpetuating and propagating the abuse. That's all you're doing. Media, news, and entertainment. Again, media and news and entertainment. I mean, they skew everything. All entertainment does is make fun of your abuse, of being poor and struggling, and how these elections are fake, and how politics is fake, and how it's all a game, and that you're on the shit end of the stick of it. They take your money, if you go to the movies to watch it, they take your money if you're paying for 400 channels. They take your money if you're paying for a YouTube premium. They take your money, no matter what, they're taking your money. They're stealing your money in exchange to keep you distracted and keep you dopamined up, so that way you are entertained and aren't focusing on what's real. And that same goes with the news and media. It's all, the news is 100% a lie, a skewing of facts. The news is, history's written by the winners. The news writes the history, and news is all government owned. It's all government propaganda. It's all to drum up whatever they want to happen next. It's all predictive programming, all of it, 100%. So I mean, that right there is just enough to get that through. And then the very last one I have on here, and there are more, of course, guys, but we're just going to make this short. The other one on here is religion. Let's just take the Christian religion, for example. How does the Christian, in order to even be a Christian, what is the first thing you have to acknowledge? That you are sinful, that you were born sinful, that you are lower than dirt, and the only thing that you have any hope to be anything in this world of any kind of material is to accept Christ as your Savior. If you do not accept this imaginary Christ as your Savior and beg Him for forgiveness for your imaginary sins, or even, whatever, that you were automatically, so that they're automatically labeling you as the cause of the decay of society. And in order to get away from that, you have to accept this imaginary God that nobody can see, who's supposedly all loving, all kind, all knowing and everything else, but literally watches billions upon billions of people be abused and mistreated, in slavery, wage slavery, sexual trade, sexual slavery, tortured, and everything else. Billions of people around the world every day. So, religion is one of the most abusive besides government. Well, and your parents, right? For breeding, because it's their fault you're even here. If they didn't have you, you wouldn't be here. So hopefully that gives a good breakdown of what abuse is, guys. It's extremely simple. See, this box here, what it does is it will complicate. Anytime you think these types of things that are so far out there, like, my parents are abusive, but my parents were the kindest, nicest people on earth. My grandparents were abusive. My grandparents were the nicest, kindest people on earth. No, they weren't. You're gaslighting yourself, guys. You maybe compared to all the rest of the filth around this society, they were okay, and they gave you, hugs and kisses and told you everything was okay. But guys, everything we just went over on the definitions of abuse, your parents were abusers. Your grandparents were abusers. Because you wouldn't be here if it weren't for your grandparents bringing your parents into the world, who taught your parents to bring you into this world. So, it's very extremely simple. It is extremely simple. These are all the definitions of abuse. The biggest one being misuse. You've been placed in a mind slave program that keeps you contained and programmed, and everything outside of that, they call you, evil. They call you crazy. They write you off. You're not allowed to think outside that mind slave box. So thinking that abusers are actually your parents, teachers, school, government, work, bosses, managers, siblings, family, friends, media, news, religion, entertainment, is out there. People are like, he's crazy, he's lost his mind. No, I just showed you beyond a shadow of a doubt all these definitions of abuse. I just gave you real life examples that every single one of us has gone through and deals with, of this abuse being perpetuated on us by all these different groups of people. And the other reason this is so hard for people to accept is because in order to accept this, especially those of us who are parents, have to accept that we did these things to our kids. And it's too much for most people. Again, it causes cognitive dissonance. And when you have cognitive dissonance, you have two ways to go. One of two ways. You can only go one of two ways. Either you start utilizing the faculties of your mind, think deeply, come to conclusions, and act accordingly, change your ways, habits, behaviors, thoughts, etc., which is extremely difficult because we've been placed in a slave program that says that is completely against all of that. Or you have to double down and you have to justify, excuse, forgive, forget, and refuse to acknowledge these things, and just continue to go with the controller's definition of abuse, which is, again, really only two things: terrorist actions and the abuse of women by men. Of course, there are other things, of course, that fall in there, but those are the things they push in the media and everything else every day. So that way you will shut up and not talk about these things, because you'll be like, well, at least I'm not being abused. Well, what do you mean abused? At least I don't have terrorists coming and get me. At least, I'm not being beaten by a group of people. And then that's how they get you to shut up, because you have no right to talk, because there's others being abused worse than you. So because your abuse is lower than theirs and not as extreme, then you need to shut your mouth and just do what you're told. And that's where they got us, guys, the mind slave box. So I hope this, helps you guys clear up some stuff. Very important. Again, this is so important. The definition of abuse and the recognition and acceptance of what it is in this board right here is the first and most important step to get laid down as your foundation for the next many, many steps to your freedom that we're going to go over. So best wishes, guys.